Hello, welcome to our first National Assembly in a series of National Assemblies. This one will be focused on racism policy for the ALBA Party. We're hosting this National Assembly off the back of our national conference just passed in Glasgow, where a motion was passed by acclaim at conference that requested a National Assembly be brought and issues raised with an eye to a working group being established to develop policy for the ALBA Party going forward. As with every National Assembly host, members who have attended and also interested members will be able to take part in that working group and hopefully bring forward party policy or potential party policy at future conferences and national councils. So I'll first introduce our guests. We have Tony Osei, who is the convener of African Scots for ALPA, and he was the man who proposed this motion at our most recent conference. And so we can thank him tonight for the reason for us all being here. We also have Dr. Choma Nafor. I hope I've who is the executive director and convener of the Diaspora African Women's Support Network, CIC. We also have Dr. Isaac Bonad, who is an engineer by trade and works at Bay Systems in Glasgow. And we also have the party chair and the first Scots Asian woman ever elected to a parliament in Scotland, Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh, OBE. And so without further ado, I'll pass over to Tony. We'll have 15 minutes for each speaker and then go to a Q&A section at the end. I'm going to be quite tight on time for the speakers, so bear that in mind and don't ramble on because you've been warned. So Tony, on you go.
Thank you very much for having me here. Like you said, I've looked at the time at just 5 minutes exactly past 7, so I've got up to 20 minutes past 7. I'm keeping time. I'm going to be as quick as possible, but I'm not sure it's going to take me up to 15 minutes to deliver my speech. Yeah, again, it was a milestone for the opportunities that we have been given to our ALBA party to have this time moment like this to speak and air our voices, especially from African perspective. We have clamored for change for a long time for a political party to redress issues and embark on a practical delivering of diversity and inclusion. That's been a very politically cosmetic decoration in terms of the way I see it. Often I do understand in the political system, they say people make society, society don't make people. It means that the policies that govern the society, the policies that govern the country is actually designed and proposed by people. People cannot use their ideology to manipulate systems. And I believe that Africans have been kept down institutionally, and institutionally, African can be accommodated, I suppose. Today, we're using the word and a general term, no place for racism, which I think is broader title in terms of carrying along all ethnic minorities in Scotland. But my stand would be on African perspective. For African Scots, as we identified, we long time wanted the country and our society and our party to recognize Africans as ethnic minority people, because a continental Africa is a big continent of its own and should not be diminished and put under subject to other ethnic minorities. So we wanted to be recognized as ethnic minority of our own. Furthermore, founding this proposal for asking the party to support our movement of finding a penal code that could protect Africans following lived experience by Africans. We all know in this country and worldwide, Africans have encountered different types of experiences in the society, which is very much challenging. And that, again, we talked about poverty, and we know that sometimes this system can actually promulgate people to be poor, because not everybody has a sort of shock absorb to be able to take things and move on. Things that is designed by the system institutionally can keep people down. It could affect people's morale and people's esteem, which will now degenerate to life poverty. So now I think it's time that we will have to look at this from a political perspective and see how our party could join force with us to recognize that we need to eradicate this sort of discrimination. The discrimination, especially from Africans, you can see Africans are increasingly in inequality, and in everywhere we think about it, in all arms of society, African risks discrimination. And like I say in our proposal, I do think we should find a policy that can address this. When we talk about inequality, we talked about diversity. I don't see that in practice. I don't think that us just talking about it during campaigns is enough to eradicate it. I think it should go to other ways that other penal code has been recognized and kept it as law, and people would actually respect it, because people will not respect it if there is no penal code that will address that, which is why we sit down there today. Let's just understand that this is not naivety. This is politically created, if I use that. And I don't think our party should ignore this. I think our party should neatly uphold our demand or our proposal and create special policies that need to address this structural racism as we see that's experienced by especially Africans in all areas of life, which include education, housing, and myself. I'm constantly confronted with people coming to, I am a pro bono officer who run a community center here in South Bullock, and people come here every day with different issues, and all of these issues is tailored to racism. You can see. And I understand that in police system, in a judicial system, in educational system, in everywhere you go, you see this experience, a very special segregation in low-income areas and with poor qualities and cramped houses and structures, often intersected with form of discriminations and oppression and the bias of race, color, ethnicity, and religious origin, genetic features and languages, religions and belief, politically or other ways, membership of our national minorities. This institutional racism, as we see it, and misogyny is something that rises into Afrophobia, which is why we are looking at it on asking for Afrophobic law from our party to support, to particularly tackle this discrimination and xenophobia. So, and then as you see, from children that was born, the African children that were born in this country, they can't define racism. They cannot define discrimination until they actually began the journey from primary school. Once in the primary school, stories were told to these children where they begin to understand the difference between colors of people, which I don't believe that color should be an issue. Human are human. I've always used certain analogies in terms of how the word look. The beauty of the word is the diversity of the color. Otherwise, things would be people would be bored if everyone looked alike or the same. Like we have choices of cars, of colors, animals from the same species but different behaviors. This is the nature beyond human comprehension, is the beauty of the word. And diversity should be practical. We should embrace the differences. We should respect people's existence, regardless, as natural way it should happen. We cannot be this or that at the same time. That the same way we are diverse in our area of talent and areas of discipline, the same way people is, it makes life a beauty. And if we don't recognize this proposal, I don't think that is meaningful for any party or any politician to stand up and talk about talk about equality and diversity. I think this should be the first step for us to find way to deal with this issue and rename it. And that will actually bring in a total immersion of people into the society and allow people to function as same, entitled to same things, same purposes. And like I say, there's so many things I wouldn't mention at the moment, or I wouldn't know how to strategically put them correctly, not to offend anyone. But we see is in evidences that suggest that many people of African origin going through a lot of things that they shouldn't go through, that cannot diminish them and keep them down in such a way that, you know, they feel as second humans and lose their confidence to operate as people. I've seen doctors, medical doctors, work as carers. That not because they're not medical doctors, they're actually qualified medical doctors. But tell me, why would the society discriminate against them and put them in a place where they are not supposed to be? I don't know how to justify that. So honestly, I can't put this more, but the little I have put here through, I will allow the rest of my panels to come on board with their own idea of how to tackle this. But I will stop here at this moment and will ask the National Assembly to look at the proposal to adopt a policy that we call Afrophobia law to tackle this racism.
Thank you very much, Tony. And you were within your 15 minutes. You had 4 minutes to spare there. That was very, very good. We'll move on to Dr. Chioma Nwafor right now, a strong, independent woman, as you'd expect from this party. We love strong, independent women. And I'm sure she'll bring a female perspective to what she's going to be discussing. So I'll move over to Dr. Nwafor just now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robert. And thanks to the ALBA National Council for organizing the National Assembly on racism policy this evening. And many thanks to Mr. Tony Osei, who is the current convener for African Scots for ALBA, for proposing the No Place for Racism motion during the conference. I want to focus my contribution in this evening's discourse on what has come to be known as structural racism that Tony mentioned in his discussion. You see, racism, it's a very emotive word and can elicit different reactions, emotional reactions. But except you have a lived experience of racism, it's like something that is mundane or something you don't even understand. You see, racism as an ideology, because it's an ideology, exists in a society at both the individual and then the institutional levels. At the individual level, we witness and experience them every day. You might be going on street and somebody is swearing or saying stuff, right? But where it becomes very insidious, it's at the institutional levels. Institutional racism is how institutional policies and practices could create different outcomes for different racial groups. And that is why I was very happy when Mr. Osei called on me to be part of this panel, and also very profoundly thank the ALBA Party for this opportunity. I think this is the first time that Africans are leading a discourse on racism themselves, because what you see previously would be other people speaking on our behalf. not because we don't know what it feels like to be racially abused or to pay the ethnic penalty, but because we don't get opportunities where we can discuss some of these things like we are discussing this evening. So you find institutional racism across all boards, particularly in policing, in education, in all sphere, all strata of Scottish life. You find those. And the problem with institutional racism, because the individual racism for me, it's a challenge, but it won't affect your outcome. You just say, oh, that's what it is, and move on. But when it comes to structural racism that is deep-rooted in many policy fields, structures, and systems across Scotland, you find that it's like people are paying lip service to these issues, right? And that is what I coined a term that I call race washing, just like whitewashing. People are just talking about it, putting policies, fantastic policies on paper, but no critical actions and nothing to show for those policies. So if I just deviate briefly to race terminology, you see, I often say to people that I don't believe in racism. I believe in ethnicism, because we are all one human race, whether Scottish, European, African, or Caribbean or Black. We are all one human race. But the race terminology was developed and used to impose a racial hierarchy according to perceived ethnic and natural characteristics. And this racial hierarchy still exists today. In one of my podcasts in one university, I did mention about data justice. For the first time since I came here, 2022 census gave Africans and other ethnic minority individuals, particularly people from African descent, the opportunity to identify their ethnicity. So it's no longer Black Scottish or Black whatever. It's now African, Nigerian, Kenyan, Ghanaian, and all that. So it starts with data justice so that we don't continue to perpetuate the racial hierarchy that the manufacturers, if you like, of racial terminology had in mind when they did that. And if you're looking at, because Tony did mention about Africophobia penal code, and I can share his sentiment and the sentiment of other people like myself that supported this idea. If you're looking at the racial spectrum or racial hierarchy, it's very easy to see that Africans are at the bottom of the hierarchy. And when it's just used like we are trying to address racism tonight, or we are just using the term BME or BME, all these sort of terms that we like to use when we talk about racism and structural racism in Scottish life, it's kind of would just not allow us to disaggregate the data and then see the differences across different racial groups. It's quite interesting to see before 2022 that you will find somebody being referred to as an Asian. So they have a name, Asian. You find another person being referred to as an Indian, a Pakistani. But you see Africa, Black. So many people will call me Black woman. And then I say, I'm not Black, I'm Africa, because I'm from a continent that is called the continent of Africa. And this is what I call microaggression. Now, if we move back to understanding structural racism, the only way we can understand structural racism is through disaggregated equality data collection that will document racist crime according to ethnicity. That is when we begin to see the massive effect and impact of racism on people like me, Tony, and Dr. Bernard here. In a recent research that I led in 2020 in Dawson with some of my colleagues, we unpacked systems of structural racism based on the analysis of patterns experienced by ethnic minorities, particularly of African descent. Our findings was quite very eye-opening, but not surprising, because we found that people from our continent face higher unemployment rates and difficulties accessing the job market, whether due to discrimination during the selection processes for vacancies, and even when they get their foot in the door, advancement or career progression becomes very, very challenging and tough. And this is as a result of structural inequalities. Ethnic minorities, as we know, and we can see from a lot of data, are overrepresented in certain underqualified positions and sectors. You find them being they are overrepresented in certain underqualified positions, but they are underrepresented in managerial positions, not because they don't qualify, but because of the concrete ceiling, not glass ceiling, concrete. And then concrete ceiling, because concrete is very difficult to see. Because when you say glass ceiling, you can see a glass and you can shatter it if you like. But concrete is hard, it's difficult to see. And because it's hidden, it is very difficult to attain whatever criteria or conditions they are asking you to attain. So these are some of the issues that racism would bring for us and for people that with lived experiences. Now, you are looking at 21st century Scotland. And if you permit me, I will share more data with you in this session, where you have less than 2% of professors of African descent. You have a lot of Africans in higher education here, but look at the proportion of the people that you have in high or managerial positions. It's nothing to write home about. Yet we have the equality, diversity, and inclusion thing all over policies. So concrete ceilings are barriers to career advancement for people of color, particularly women, people that bears my intersectionality, where you are an African and you're a woman, so you are a minority within a minority. And because concrete is difficult to break and even impossible to see through, unlike a glass ceiling, it is unattainable. Because it cannot be seen, it remains hidden, and we are not allowed to discuss these issues. That is why we are so very thankful to the party for this opportunity. What are some of the solutions? Because I don't want to get into my 15 minutes. Some of the solutions, and the one that I would really want the party to consider if we are going to take this forward and take it very seriously, is equality data collection. Collecting equality data disaggregated by all grounds of racialization, such as ethnicity, race, religion, and migration background, is essential, because it will help us to obtain a more accurate picture of the experiences of ethnic minorities in Scotland. Equality data, as we know, has proven very effective by informing evidence-based policy changes in gender equality in employment. So I believe it will also achieve what we're looking for in terms of racialization and racism in the labor market. I don't like to call it racism, I call it structural imperfection, but if I'm going to be very honest this evening, it is pure racism, where Africans suffer disproportionately in this market, labor market, policing, healthcare, and people would continue to say equality, equality, equality. But I disagree with that. I would want to look at equity and justice, not just equality. Equity and justice are critical in addressing racial discrimination. Aside from disaggregating racial data, we need to pay attention to equity. Equity is not only dividing resources fairly and equally, but also considering differences among people. That is equity. Differences such as race, socioeconomic status, that will require different support to ensure the same opportunity for success. And then justice is also very key to addressing these issues. So the route to achieving equity will not be accomplished through treating everyone equally. I know it's controversial, but that is the truth. It can only be achieved by treating everyone equitably and justly according to their circumstances. Healthcare is an area where we are so much paying a lot of ethnic penalty. But I would like to stop here. And if I have another opportunity, I can unpack the racism in healthcare in Scotland. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Chua. Just a reminder for everyone that's watching on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, and in the call, after our third speaker, or fourth speaker, sorry, we'll be having a Q&A session, so keep your questions for then. Fantastic. Just a bit of clarification for someone on YouTube comments, Donald. This is a National Assembly, not a National Council. They're two different bodies that the party operates. And so we'll move on to our next speaker, Dr. Isaac Bonad. And your 15 minutes. Now, everyone else has been very good, very good with their time. So it's pressure's on you now to stick within your 15 minutes. So take the floor.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you to the audience. Very much appreciate the content from Tony and Dr. Choma. Thank you for what you have done. And I can't put it better than what has been said. That's specifically what we are here for, to talk about anti-racism policy to be established in Alba. I will not take long because I can add relevant points than what has been already said. So the thing that I want to say is that failure to take the lead in developing national anti-racism strategies to address specifically discrimination against Africans and other ethnic minority, but particularly Africans, gives me the impression, and not only me, but I believe most of my fellow Africans, it gives the impression that Alaba, like other few parties, serves on Afrophobia behavior, which can maybe be a misinterpretation, but that's the feeling we have within our community. And we believe that this platform that Alaba gives to us can help us together achieve something to fight this Afrophobia behavior by implementing a policy that can go against that. It is worth noting that the manifestation of this particular type of racism, Afrophobia, as we call it, undermines social cohesion, peaceful coexistence, good governance, and constitute a violation of human rights. Therefore, we believe, and I believe strongly, that the moral implication of allowing this Afrophobia to continue unabated should be an additional worry for the international image of Alba, that I believe will very soon constitute the next government in Scotland. So I put it to Alaba to do something to avoid having his image put in a mud. So I'm quite confident, and I'm happy that Alaba will have a good ear to hear our message and help us to go in the direction to fight this Afrophobia here in Scotland. I think I've reached the conclusion, and that's the contribution I wanted to put across to this meeting tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isaac. Clearly, one of your many, many talents is brevity, which is much appreciated, I'm sure. And also share your optimism that ALPA will be the next governing party of Scotland. And somebody else that shares that complete faith and belief in that position is our party chair, Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh. She was obviously the first ever elected Scots Asian woman and also amongst many other talents, a director, producer, and a soap star. You can watch many of them online, I believe. But anyway, I'll pass over to party chair, Tazmina Ahmed Sheikh.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, from one chair to another. It's a pleasure to be here this evening and to hear so many wise contributions. To give a bit of background to this National Assembly, this came about because Tony proposed a very specific policy to one area of racism suffered, if we're going to use that word for now, Dr. Choma, racism or discrimination suffered, which is Afrophobia. And I had suggested to Tony that since the party hadn't looked at a policy relative to racism, that would be a broader and perhaps better start to the discussion. As Dr. Bonard correctly points out, I share his optimism that Alba will indeed have a very important part to play in the Scottish parliamentary elections, and that is why our prospectus upon which we will stand requires to have a policy which is well thought out, well researched, makes sense, and covers areas that to date have not been covered by other political parties and have left many parts of the community isolated and unrepresented. So across the board, our national assemblies have worked very hard to start with a group discussion at National Assembly level to understand what the issues are that require to be addressed, then formulate working groups to cover the various different strands that are identified at National Assembly, and thereafter work to formulate policy that comes before the ultimate decision makers of the party, which are of course the party members. And I would be suggesting that that is what will happen after this National Assembly. This topic, this issue of racism is huge. We would like to think in Scotland that we're a hugely tolerant society and racism is being addressed. It isn't. The figures from 21 to 22 would indicate that there were 7,000 hate crimes in Scotland reported, and almost 2/3 of those crimes were racially aggravated crimes. That's massive. And there's a lot of work going on around equality in Scotland in this party and out with this party. And there are lots of groups who have been represented extremely well of late, core minority groups in Scotland. And I feel very strongly that the group that faces the biggest discrimination in Scotland is the one that's getting the least attention. And that has to change. Historically, racism, anti-Black, anti-Asian, all of those behaviours were very much at the top of people's agendas, and they have been allowed to slip. I'm not going to say deliberately, perhaps just by circumstance, because us as people of colour have got behind all of the other inequalities that exist and have been very supportive of ensuring equality across the board, sometimes to our own detriment, because racism and anti-racism policies have fallen absolutely by the wayside, as those figures demonstrate to you. Almost 2/3 of racial aggravated crimes in Scotland, hate crimes, are race-related. Tony, you mentioned school in one of your comments. I think what we have to look at moving forward is where the areas of racism exist. They happen within school at a very young age, through the education system, through employment, and through various structural organisations that exist in Scotland. And we have to think about how we address that. And in a working group going forward, we're going to have to ensure that we identify people with those specific areas of expertise and experience to think about what the policy needs to be effective. I'll start with talking about school because I'm of mixed race and I was one of the very first mixed race kids in Edinburgh when I went to primary school. And the racism I faced, the kicking, the beating, the abuse, much of which I hid from my parents because I didn't want my father to feel guilty, that because he was a Pakistani, I was being abused, but I was. All of that existed then exists now. And things that I thought happened to me that I vowed would never happen to my children, happened to my children. And as recently as the past couple of weeks have happened to my youngest child in a school in Scotland. So this matters to me and I feel very passionately about it. And we in this party feel very strongly about a lot of things that our children are facing in Scotland in the education system, across a number of different things that they're being taught. And we have to make sure that way up that agenda is ensuring that our pupils feel protected relative to these crimes that they're facing, and there is not underreporting, but they feel safe in reporting of them. There's support mechanisms in place. So it exists in schools, it exists in further education, it exists in employment circumstances. I've got a wealth of experience across all of these areas. And of course, I have experience as a parliamentarian in that respect. So really my contribution is simply to say, we would love to think we live in a Scotland where we are better than everywhere else. We're not. It requires to be addressed that we can, because I believe within our party, for which I can speak, because I have knowledge of our membership and the great people who exist within it, they will be horrified at some of the things that we'll have heard this evening, and we're very keen to work with us to make sure that we formulate a policy to create a Scotland that which can be equal and equitable, to use your terminology, Dr. Chioma, for all. We're not going to solve all of this as individuals. Just like a lot of policy making across the party, we have to call upon the expertise that exists. So I really want to end my remarks by, first of all, praising those in our party who've been working across the various equality strands and have done a tremendous amount of work which form part of the equality policies that you will have seen and you've received if you open your ALBA emails. And a lot of you are very naughty because you say that you don't know that things exist, and they do because they're there. And there's a huge raft of work that's been done relative to that. But this is an area that is on the agenda to be addressed, and therefore this will now be addressed. But I want to call upon those in this call, and perhaps some of the people who may have questions later on, to identify people with expertise who can form part of a working group, so we can start to work to ensure that we don't have a broad brush approach to everything, but we identify where the issues exist and we come up with solutions, and solutions that can be enshrined within our written constitution for an independent Scotland, where all rights of individual citizens in Scotland, regardless of where they have come from, can be enshrined and relied upon in the future. That is where we want to be as a party, and I'm sure as an independent Scotland, what we should be working towards. We face lots of hurdles, but nothing that we cannot overcome. And I want to pay tribute to my fellow speakers, who I know I'll be right in saying, although I don't know many of you individually, and unfortunately not for long enough yet, but I'll have the opportunity to develop relationships with you. But I do know that just like all of the other people on this call, in this group who've marched for all sorts of equalities, I know you've marched for every other equality. But it's also now time to ensure that we're marching in anti-racism efforts, which must be front and centre. And within that, of course, there are many different countries, people from different countries, different backgrounds, ethnicities, cultures, all of these things that require to be embraced. And we're a complicated pot, and therefore can't all fit under one easy BAME heading, because it's much more complicated than that. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Chair.
Thank you, and as I'd expect, on time. So I'd like to open up to any questions that people may have in the call or online. I noticed there's quite a lot of members on the call that take part in the Equalities Group led by Eva Comrie and supported by so many others, including, I know, Tony is a member of that. If there's any additional comments, anything that you think we should be moving forward with, just raise your hand in the call and I can bring you in. But following this call, as Tasmina touched upon, we will be establishing a working group, and I'll contact everyone who's RSVP'd to the event and follow up with details and how we pursue that, and I'll also liaise with Tony as well. If there are any comments, feel free to unmute yourself if I've not been able to see. Our panel was so good. They've answered every single question people may have had. Fantastic. That's exactly what we like to see.
Well, I do hope, particularly in relation to our guest speakers, that those on the call can think of further statements or questions, perhaps we can ask them for, because it's very, very good of them to attend with their knowledge in this area. I'll not stick to type, Robert, given that we don't have any questions yet that I can see, and I'll ask Dr. Choma a question, if I may.
Just as you said that, we have Guy Bola.
Oh, okay, good. I'll let Guy go first then.
If you'd like to turn on your microphone.
Hi to
Guy.
everyone. Is it on? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We can't see you, but
Hi guys. Sorry, I was in my car because I was walking, but I know about the meeting, so that's why I just stopped somewhere in the car park and tried to involve the meeting as well and listen to you guys and bring my participation. What I can say that, first of all, thank you again for give us as an African through ALBA opportunity to prove ourselves. I think change may be happen, and change will happen every time on the road. So Scotland is moving forward. SNP is going down. It's time for us that ALBA rise up. ALBA needs to be in charge. Last time I was, maybe 1 month ago, I met Uzma, our current First Minister in government. I told him that I'm from ALBA, but I think now is the time for you to be kicked out. He was laughing. I said, no, I'm not laughing. You are laughing, I'm not laughing. You will be kicked out, so ALBA will take the place. So it was so funny for him, like I'm wishing that, because ALBA gave us opportunities to bring our participation. As African, we have a continent for 52 countries. I can't tell you exactly how many African people have here, but I have too many talents, the diversity is too huge. So I don't take long on my time just to say that, bravo, thank you so much, guys. I think all together can make a difference if it happen, and make this change. That's it. Thank you, guys.
thank you, Guy, and your thanks is much appreciated. And I will move back to Tasmina, as I know she would want to ask a question. And she's muted.
I'm at my best when I'm muted, Robert. I'm sure the majority of the call would concur. Dr. Choma, I wanted to ask you, as a woman, and in your experience, how much you feel the challenges, whether it's institutional or structural, or even from a hate crime perspective, how much more difficult it is to be a woman of colour, facing further barriers as it may be for a man, because we know it's much more difficult for women generally in society, and I'm interested in your experience from a woman of colour's perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a very straightforward question, and that requires a straightforward answer. It's massively difficult to live in Scotland and work in Scotland as a woman of color. When you have this sort of intersectionality where gender meets race, and then it becomes a big challenge. When you look at racism and gender, these are two social justice constructs that we always like to see and hear people talk about, whether at institutional levels or even individual levels. But the reality for people like us is that we hear the talk, but we don't see the actions, right? You face a very difficult challenge in terms of gender pay gaps. You look at and again, it's difficult to prove, although informally and during informal communication or conversations, you hear what a colleague doing exactly the same thing you were doing at the same level, what they earn, and then you say to yourself, wow, is this the way it works? Because men, according to research and what we have been conditioned to believe is that the men are better negotiators than women. So they can negotiate their pay, they can do whatever. So you are facing that ethnic penalty, and you are facing also gender penalty. That's just the truth. And then when it comes to career advancement, that's an area where you find women are struggling a lot. But it's quite surprising to me that the gender pay gap has been, to a reasonable extent, not just gender pay gap, and then gender opportunities and women attaining leadership position. These two, in recent times, they've been largely being addressed, and although we continue to address them, but we don't see the second or the other face of the coin, that's ethnicity. So while we are doing very well at addressing gender inequalities, we're not doing as well as we would like in addressing racial inequality. Then what you also see is what I call tokenism. So you find organizations just having poster images just to show that they are ticking the box, which to me doesn't work. So from my personal lived experience, I've witnessed and experienced firsthand, not people telling me, what this sort of challenges people like myself face both in the society and in the labor market. If ALBA, just like the party chair has said, it's able to organize policies or bring people together, I think you're already doing that, to formulate policies that can work, not just trying to just whitewash something, but policies that can work. And I want to emphasize data equality. Equality data collection is key. And that would be what I will be passing across to Tony, since he's at the part of the committee. Equality data collection will be key. Just the same way we disaggregate gender data, let's also disaggregate this construct called race or ethnicity, so that we can begin to address some of the challenges that we face in Scotland today. I don't know if that answers your question, Chair.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, and I'm sure I'll be speaking on for everyone here when I say I hope that you play a key role in the working group that comes forward, Dr. Chioma, because women of your brilliance can really assist the party in achieving its aims. So just a couple of comments from YouTube. Had a few comments. Bill Irvine said, "Great podcast, keep it up." This will be the first of a series of National Assemblies. The next one, I believe, will be on land reform, which is a date to be confirmed. And another little plug for the party. This Saturday, we have our National Council, our special National Council, where we'll be deciding our general election strategy and various constitutional amendments, which are much less interesting than both the topic tonight and indeed general election strategy. We've got a hand raised here, so I'll just pass over. You're muted. Do you want to speak? Yeah, here you are.
I want to speak. Okay, my name is Onyekachi. First of all, I want to thank everyone for the meeting. I really enjoyed the conversation and the points being made already. I don't have much thing to say because already the points have been made, but I just want to chip in one or two things regarding the racics. It's becoming too much, especially somebody like me that use bus to work. I mean, sometimes inside the bus, the kind of embarrassment and racists that will be encountered inside the bus is getting too much. So you people should know what to do about this, especially inside the bus. I don't want to start talking the experiences that I've been having inside the bus. It's too much. Sometimes I feel like to cry, but I mean, there's nothing I can do. So let's do something about the bus especially. Thank you.
Can I jump in quickly to just
Yes.
say something? Yeah. Yeah, Onyeka, I think I can relate to your experiences, because when I think it was it in 2009, 2010, I used to dread using the bus. I used to dread that because of the type of individual racism that you see. Let me say something here. You see, migration is a two-way street. It's not a unidirectional thing. It's a bi-directional movement. I was so surprised when I traveled back home to Nigeria to see the number of Brits in Abuja, in Lagos, in as far as where do we have Adamawa? Adamawa is far enough. So that made me understand and realize that migration is not just Africans migrating to Scotland or going to the West. It's also Westerners going to Africa. So it's a bi-directional movement. It's not unidirectional. So the idea, I think it's more of advocacy and educating people that this is not just about Africans or Asians or whoever it's in Scotland. We are also contributing. The way that Brits and Westerners are treated in Africa is entirely different than the way Africans are treated in the West. And that's because of this racial hierarchy that was created as far back as 300 years back, if I'm not mistaken. So if we continue to perpetuate that superiority of one race over the other, this is the sort of experiences that you will have. And this is where Afric-phobic law or penal code becomes very highly important, not just as a political thing, right? Because I don't know if Tony has defined Africophobia, but let me just summarize by giving my own understanding of Africophobia. It's simply a specific form of racism that refers to any act of violence like Onyekachi experiences, right? Discrimination, including racist speech, fueled by historical abuses and negative stereotyping. And this sort of thing can lead to dehumanizing somebody. And it's not just dehumanizing, making them feel super unsafe in a community where they should call their own. I really take this thing very seriously, to say the least. And I hope Alba Party takes it seriously. The only way to challenge this sort of behavior is if it is made into law, so that people know they are breaking a law, not just race washing it or ethnicizing it. So it's no longer a political thing, because at the other end of this racial abuse is an individual that is a human being with emotions. So we need to think of these things like that way. And we need to keep in mind, if you don't take anything away from this podcast or assembly, please remember that migration is a two-way street. It's not just Africans coming here. You have barrage of Brits, Europeans, Americans walking the streets of Abuja and feeling very safe. As far as Adamawa, you see a lot of them. Thank you very much.
Yeah. If you allow me to come in there to add to what you said, Dr. Choma, you're absolutely correct. Onyeka made mention of this, and this is exactly what the kind of report I face encountering every day, and that I have fallen to me, saying that is a continuing trend of discrimination that is fed across in everyday life of African minority Scots, whether it's in the streets or on the bus or workplaces. We see this every time, and with this kind of complaint we get, which is the reason why we are proposing this penal code, as you say, that will kind of provide answer to all of these questions that is associated with race discrimination, stereotype, and dehumanization, which is carried out by, sentiments. So I do believe strongly that if we support this proposal and call it a name, that will definitely provide justice for all of this. It's not only because it becomes deprive people from not committing it, but it will provide that understanding that human race is the same and people should live in harmony. And that's, I think, Dr. Choma has spelled out already, and we should be looking forward to making sure that this is widely known or widely accepted by everybody and live as one.
Chair, may I now just come in for one final comment? Thanks, Robert. Just following on from what I've heard, and I've greatly enjoyed it. Hearing people's personal experiences, like a simple thing about going on a bus, is really important, because that really, it's very difficult sometimes for people to understand what it feels like to be singled out in that manner. And as I say, I speak from personal experience, and my kids still get it, where you're called a paki, let me just say it now, and in such a derogatory way, and it really is deeply hurtful. And that's along with all of the other issues that kids face at school and all the other discriminations. And I think telling a simple story like you just did, the previous speaker, Onyekachi, if I said that correctly, that is really important, because I think if you want to get people to understand, telling stories about what a day in the life of a person is like really allows a very important connection. And I hope that going forward in the steering group, we get people who have stories, because that's what will connect with people. The other point I wanted to make is that all people of colour, if we want political parties to make policies not for us, but about us and with our involvement, that's a two-way street. So it's very easy to criticise that policies might not be in existence if you haven't put yourself forward to be part of that decision-making process. So following the two-way street analogy that Dr. Choma mentioned, albeit relative to a different element of this, Alba Party will absolutely welcome with open arms people of all colours and ethnicities to come and participate in our policy debates, and ensure that every policy that we create, not just ones that are about racism or Afrophobia or whatever it might be, but ones that are about transport, health, land reform, ensure that there are elements of it that are cognizant of the fact that Scotland is made up of people from all sorts of places. But that can't happen if we don't participate. So I'm going to ask our people from Scottish Africans for Alba and any from Scottish Asians for Alba, who are two very important parts of the party, that you also need to go away. I need to go away and get people to get involved in the party, because it's very easy to complain from the sidelines, but what we actually need to be doing is getting right down and in there with the policy making, because it's a party of equality. Everyone gets an equal say. Every member of Alba is equal. Every person has a vote, and we're equal in every sense. So you've got to get involved, exercise your vote, use your voice, make sure it's heard, and that's how we get progress. We want to be not just about recognising the issues that exist, but making sure we have the answers that we need to bring forward for Scotland. And I honestly think, in terms of an independence party, we are the last party standing and the last hope for achieving independence in Scotland. And therefore, the onus on us is even bigger than ever before, because we have to make sure the policy platform we create is one that every person in Scotland feels that they can align themselves to. And with that, I'm going to make a plug for Friday, because Teresa Diffasey has quite correctly put in the chat bar. On Friday, there's a Ceilidh in Aberdeen, being organised by Aberdeen, LACU and Aberdeenshire LACU, a joint venture, very important demonstration of working in tandem across two particularly different groups. But we must go and support that if we can. And we have members participating in that too. And of course, National Council. National Council is open to every member of the ALBA party to attend. And if you're a delegate, you can, of course, speak and vote at it. So you have to be part of policy to make it and ensure it encompasses all of us. Okay, so that's an open invitation to everybody. And that's me taking up more than my allotted time. And the chair has been extremely kind on this occasion, for which I thank him.
Yes, and you took away the plug I was going to give on Teresa's behalf. I'm sure if you were in the chair and somebody did that, God, you wouldn't want to. Anyway, we'll move on. I think as the comments online and again comments from people who have been in the Zoom have said, it's been a fantastic discussion, and really this is just the first step, and we will build upon this using your lived experiences and the expertise that you bring. And so I will be contacting everyone after this to follow up, to establish that working group, like we've done with transport, like we've done with housing, and those working groups have shown real fruit from their labour, as evidenced most recently at our national conference, where we had a couple of fantastic policies passed from both working groups. And so hopefully at the next ALBA conference or National Council beyond the one on Saturday, we will have the beginnings of a policy that we can hope to go a long way in making people feel welcome in Scotland. Because as I think it says in the ALBA Qualities Manifesto, we are all equal in ALBA. So I would just like to wrap up. Thank everyone for attendance. Thank you for our guest speakers, Tony Osei, Dr. Chwoma Nafor, Dr. Isaac Bonad, and of course the party chair, Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and there is Eva Comrie coming in. I feel like Tasmina for the first time in my life.
Well,
a vote of
Robert,
thanks to the chair.
Well, we'll have none of that in this party, because you're well aware that you cannot. You are Robert Reid, a man, and identifying as such forevermore. However, can I, and as Eva has quite correctly prompted all of us, can I sincerely express a vote of thanks in the chair for his expert chairing of this evening's proceedings.